with the question on how much control humans have over the forces of the universe. Free will has conjured up many definitions, from the ability to make choices, thought and action with no cause, the ability to override God's will with our own, and the freedom to create one's own life free from exterior influences. There is also the matter of determinism, which implies that happens is all pre-planned and cannot be rendered in any way. This brings into question many matters, including control over the forces of nature, property, control over the sequence of events, purpose and the nature humans were created with. The question of free will has brought forth a fair share of controversies. First off, there is really no way to prove for or against it. The scriptures at times seem to endorse free will and also reject it. Many times in the scriptures, we read of people being given the ability to make choices and being punished for doing evil. However, we also have other scriptures of prophecies, which have all come to pass, along with passages in relation to God's supremacy. The biggest controversy over free will comes from the belief that free will means that many people will choose hell. Others state that hell gives no one free will, considering it does not give you any choice but to turn or burn, and the only choice people would willingly make is to turn, along with the notion of forcing someone to suffer forever. The main argument is that once one goes into eternity, that nothing changes. However, scientifically, scripturally and reasonably we can conclude time does not stop. It can expand into more dimensions, but never can stop. Many early theologians, such as Clement of Alexandria, Bahrican, and Gregory of Nyssa, believed that the reasonable man would freely choose to follow Christ upon receiving the punishment of hell. They believe in the doctrine of the apokatastasis, meaning the restoration of all things, known today as Christian universalism. The matter of free will is not an issue existing only in Christianity. In Judaism and Islam, the argument of free will exists, as it does in Eastern religions. In many schools of Islamic thought, Allah is supreme in all matters, and the master of everyone's fate. In fact, there are many instances in the Quran stating that Allah gives those whom He pleases the ability to understand His word. In Islam, there are many schools of thought holding to a form of Muslim Calvinism, or more commonly Sufism, which is a mystical form of Islam that teaches that all people will eventually return to Allah. The scriptures speak many times of people who are not given the ability to understand the scriptures, or only some people being drawn to follow Jesus. However, many other verses speak of the restoration of all things, which seems to indicate that people are not able to understand until they are ready. This problem of free will also exists in Judaism, who for the most part affirm free will based on Deuteronomy 30 minutes and 19 seconds. By God have set before you life and death, blessing and curse, therefore choose life. However, in most sects of Judaism, the consequence of sin is simply ceasing to exist. Some fundamentalist Jews teach eternal torment, stemming from the Pharisees. The philosopher Maimonides addresses the paradox of God's supreme omnipotence, knowing all things, and the free will of man in the Teshuvah. However, one Jewish mystic Lazarus believes that free will could only be true if everyone lived in a perfect environment and existed in perfection. Within Hinduism, the matter of free will is deeply studied. Many Hindu sects follow closer to determinism, where others fall closer to free will. The Hindu mystic Swami Vivekananda stated, therefore we see at once that there cannot be any such thing as free will. The very words are a contradiction, because will is what we know, and everything that we know is within our universe, and everything within our universe is molded by conditions of time, space, and causality. To acquire freedom, we have to get beyond the limitations of this universe It cannot be found here. In Christianity, free will is a controversial subject among the various denominations. Augustine was the first to teach predestination, and the father of Western Christianity in a more fundamentalist form. This matter on free will is one of the areas that the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic Church disagree. The Eastern Orthodox Church taught that original sin affected our nature, and that salvation was something impossible to achieve on one's own, but had to make the choice to respond to the offer of salvation. Augustine created the theology that humans develop an intrinsically evil nature from Adam and Eve, and were thus bound to the law of sin and death. God had an unquenchable anger towards people that only through Jesus' sacrifice on the cross could God's anger be softened. The Roman Catholic Church declaimed teaching free will. However, in the Middle Ages, they had taught that humans were on a broad road to hell, and could only receive salvation through the Roman Catholic Church by obeying their morals, engaging in the sacraments, and participating in certain rituals and devotions. In medieval Catholic literature, there is written many prayers apostling and begging God for mercy and release from the fires of hell. The Church held to the belief that ultimately God was the judge who decided who went to heaven, purgatory, or hell. Heaven and hell were thought to be literal places, one of reward and the other of penalty. Thomas Aquinas admitted that everything that occurs has a cause. The Protestants followed into the similar Western tradition of crime and penalty. Martin Luther believed humans had no ability to choose salvation, and that it was bestowed on all, but that people had the free will to reject it, and would due to original sin. Calvin taught predestination, which meant that God decided who would be saved and who would be damned. This began the doctrine of irresistible grace, stating that the elect had no ability to resist God's grace. Arminius taught that man, while bound by original sin, had the choice to choose or reject salvation. Today, amongst Catholics and mainline Protestants, they hold to a more optimistic view of salvation, extending to more people. Today, fundamentalist evangelical Protestantism is heavily based on tenets of Calvinism and Arminianism. They believe that humans are born inherently evil, and in God's eyes are separately sinful. However, one cannot be saved unless they willingly chose to be. Even within the truth of universal salvation, the subject of free will is a difficult matter. Most will not deny that universalism is much more liberating. This teaching frees the soul from fear, anger, hate, and legalism. One is free to love God without any fire insurance motives. But free will is argued that it is limited, non-existent, or that free will is the only way one can be saved. As we can tell, the matter of free will has been a controversial subject in all world religions. In a more secular sense, the matter of free will is still difficult to find an absolute answer to. On a basic level, most people would agree that all people are bound to the laws of cause and effect. For example, if you look at people from different cultures, you see particular uniformities. People identify with particular religions normally because that's the religion they were born into. Most people do not convert out of those religions randomly. Something happens that causes them to find a different religion, so it becomes apparent that humans are not free from the laws of cause and effect. In fact, Solomon sought answers to find out how so many common people performed many of the atrocities committed in Nazi Germany. He set out many tests of non-conformity and found that people said that they would not conform and go with the group in accepting the light, but ended up conforming to what they were told to do. They say that you cannot know until you walk in another direction. This has a lot of truth, since many times we want to condemn someone for being horrible and acting self-righteous in assuming that they would never do such a thing, but ended up getting into that same situation, and did the same thing they said they would never do. As we know, in impoverished inner situations, there is more crime than in the middle-class suburban regions. As we know, many people living in impoverished regions are poor, which creates a lack of stability, and survival becomes more at stake if you do not have enough money for shelter, food, drink, or health care. So people may end up resorting to violence to get what they need, which makes survival more at stake when violence exists. The phrase, desperate times, desperate measures is very true. However, we have secular evidence that points to free will. People question if free will is fake. Would that make them robust? That is a fair question. C.S. Skinner did not believe in free will. He believed that if you could condition everyone, that you could create a utopian society. However, this experiment disproved his hypothesis. So we can safely say that humans are not robots, and we have the freedom to make choices, but are still humans, bound to the laws of nature. In fact, the scriptures say that we were created in God's image, and that we were made for God. Yet God wills for the salvation of all mankind. Apart from our carnal natures, all people have sought to alleviate suffering, seek immortality, value life, and seek out God. So the question of free will remains a mystery. With the question of determinism, there is the question on what has been predetermined or not. This brings us to the matter of prophecy. Prophecy is by its nature predicts future events. The Bible is full of prophecies. In fact, Genesis 15:13-14, God said to Abram, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I will also judge the nation whom they will serve, and afterward they will come out with many possessions." This prophesies the Israelites in Egypt. However, nothing tells when it will happen, nor where. All we do know is that they will be enslaved in a strange land for 400 years. And the only reason it was for 100 years was because of God's intervention. So it does bring into question whether the Israelites needed to be enslaved in Egypt. However, we do know that they ended up in Egypt because Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. However, Joseph cooperated with Jehovah's plan, and Israel was brought into Egypt. People have questioned that if Joseph not cooperated with God's plan, whether or not the Israelites would have been enslaved in Egypt. In the prophetic books of the Old Testament, we have several books: Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel, and a minor prophet who made many prophecies about Jesus. All of these prophecies did come to pass, but Jesus is perfect, and was cooperating all along. However, the prophetic books have a very symbolic language related to Jewish culture. The symbolism makes the prophecies open to interpretation and repetition. This puts into question whether or not prophecies are meant to be understood until their fulfillment. The New Testament also has several prophecies, particularly from Revelation. As we know quite well, there are several Christian, Jewish, and Muslim groups popping up, each claiming to understanding the prophecies. As we know, no one else can see the connection these groups see. The prophecies could be fulfilled in part. This puts into question the exact nature of the prophecies, and whether the prophecies have to be fulfilled a certain way, based on how well one cooperates with God's plan, or other situational circumstances, or freedom of choice. The final matter on prophecy and free will deal with the question on how much power over the forces of the universe one has. I don't mean like an omnipotent being, but simply we do have some power to control some sequence of events that happen in the universe. In the scriptures, such dark magic like sorcery, divination, superstition, medium, and magic are making attempts to push the limitations on the forces of the universe. This is not referring to supernatural experiences, works, gifts, or other supposed accusations of witchcraft and superstition. Sorcery is referred to as trying to push one's own limits in attempting to control things they are not meant to control. If one is given supernatural gifts, that is not necessarily sorcery. Divination is an attempt to push limits by seeking out information of the future or present that is not yet ready to be revealed. Medium means pushing limits into traveling into dimensions of realms one is not ready to travel into. Superstition is pushing the limits by making unrelated occurrences, beliefs, forces of the universe, or demons powerful enough to have effect that it would be unreasonable or unscriptural to assume power. As we know, any time we push limits beyond their point, they usually don't result in something too good. Think of a heavy truck traveling on a bridge that is carrying more weight than the bridge can handle. The bridge is going to break. Someone may get hurt. Car repair bills may be high. Repairing the bridge is going to cost money too. The main reason people push their limits is because patience is difficult for many people. And as we know, God does not work on our schedule. So most of the time, quick fixes are not an option. And essentially demons can be responsible for offering people dark magic practices which never go too well.